Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently January 21st, 2010, and this is Day 9 Daily, number 53. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How's everyone doing today? I want to show off the fact that I have a Left 4 Dead t-shirt on. I want everyone to look right at my nipple. Look at that Left 4 Dead, and the back is super cool, too. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it. I'm squatting, but yes. Oh, my God. I'm like super duper cool. I'm like proud to be a nerd. I was actually wearing my Micro Macro shirt yesterday. Thanks to thehandsomenerd.com, I got a t-shirt from my brother from the Christmas times. And now we're ready to do a little bit of StarCraft action. I'm slightly behind schedule because, as you know, I was starting the music and playing the awesome tunes from Mass Effect 1, which if you haven't played, do it because the game's unbelievable. I noticed that my viewer count was under 300, and being the vain person I am, I was like, well, that's weird. Why would less than 300 people want to hear me talk about StarCraft? And then it turns out I'm actually a dumbass, and I had not enabled the stream on TeamLiquid.net, because Team Liquid has this wonderful little thing set up where they have this little button at the top right corner that you can toggle on or off. So if you go to Team Liquid, people can link through just by clicking in the top right corner of the screen to go directly to the stream. And I just forgot to enable that. So as it turns out, it's less that I'm vain and more that I'm actually just sort of stupid. But that's okay because I repaired it by delaying it a full 2 minutes. So I sincerely apologize to my wonderful, fantastic viewers. Ooh, man, sorry, I accidentally clicked the wrong button and it exploded at me. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this little matcheroo set up right now. I'm going to have to turn down my speaker volume so that way it doesn't just blare into the mic too much. But I'm pretty excited for this match today. This is Upmagic versus Pure. I actually was going to do another match, but I was talking to my mom on the phone this afternoon, and I was watching StarCraft while I was talking to her. I don't know how many of you guys do this, but anytime you're talking to someone on the phone, you're like, You just like open up the StarCraft match, you're just watching. You don't need the volume. They're speaking Korean. You understand the game, so you're just watching. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, hold on 1 second. You just like put the phone away because he's getting dropped, and you don't know if he's going to storm a lot of workers. Well, I was doing that, and this match was actually fantastic. It was not only cool just to see the intensity of the game. There was a lot of battling going on in the game we're about to see, but also it's similar to a way that Upmagic played against Free in a game not so long ago that I actually did in another Day 9 Daily. Pretty sure it was Free. It maybe have been another player, but it was still it was a really interesting match to see because it was really interesting abuse that the players ended up doing, and my Procaster just disappeared on me, which is unfortunate. Let me shrink and adjust the size of this window. Sorry, this sometimes occurreth. There we go. So hopefully this will be good. I'm going to come over to the main screen, make sure the sizing's right. Okay, fantastic. But here's a really interesting strat that the players ended up doing on Outsider. This is Outsider, by the way. Before we talk about the interesting thing, let's just highlight the three big aspects of this map. The first one, there is an outside ring of expansions. That's probably the most important weird thing about this map. You can expand out here, there's less minerals, but it's very easy to defend. In the early game, in the late game, when recalls and drops become easier, it becomes harder. So that's the first big thing. The second thing that I would say is that starting positions are actually kind of close. These is actually not the biggest walk distances between the bases, assuming you do some sort of early expand. So expanding to your thicker resource patch, to your the one that has more minerals at it. Did you guys hear that? That's thunder in Los Angeles. What is this? It's actually been raining like nonstop the last few days, and there's actually thunder. We lost power here. Dude, Los Angeles is the dumbest designed city in the world. It just rains a little bit, and there's just weird random flooding because no one plans for water here. And of course, I'm from Leawood, Kansas, where we have like tornadoes and shit all the time, but here, man, not the case. But anyway, so if I suddenly disconnect and can't come back on, it's because I lost power. But anyways, so, pretty short rest distances. And the last thing that I guess is kind of abstract, but I think is really important to note, is the idea that if you control the center, you control the other main. So a lot of times you'll see one player going for control of the outside ring, and the other player going for control of the center, and thereby taking the other main. So traditionally in Terran vs. Protoss, the sorts of neato burrito stuff that we end up seeing is that the Protoss player, let's pretend that the Protoss is here and the Terran is here, because that's actually what happens in the game. If we're Protoss and we end up expanding here, if we can can get out into the middle of the map, take this, or maybe even not do that yet, but maybe take one side expansion, not dedicate to the ring expos, but take one, then we can take this other main, because we can make a nice big arc here. And Terrans, in a sense, they sacrifice the center, and they let Protoss do this. And the Terran takes his natural, but then expands to the outside ring, takes a double gas, and as Terran blobs out into the middle, we tend to see this flip that happens in the mid game. So what happens is the Terran player ends up getting center control. Terran will focus on taking this expo, the Protoss will start recalling here, and will focus on the side in the later parts. And I think that's a pretty significant thing to mention, because it's such a common trend on this map. It's really important to think about, are you going for ring expos or are you going for the center expos? You should structure all your plans on outsider in this fashion. I mean, it is a really weird map. You should structure all your plans in this way of, okay, I'm going to try to go for the center, and if I have to retreat, I'm going to take the side expansions, I'm going to conquer the ring, and I'm going to progress this way. So these are the sorts of thoughts that we think about. But what I love so much is about a lot of the Estro players is they focus on this little cliff right here, overlooking their opponent's natural expansion. Because if you think about it, not only can you siege this expo really easily, but also you can push into your opponent's main very easily. You don't have to worry about this high ground disadvantage if you're up here. It becomes a nice little docking point for units to plop on in via dropships. So we see a lot of aggressive play for here. And what I really like is that Upmagic, and we're just going to go ahead and begin the game right now, Upmagic did a similar type style build. I actually just want to briefly double check on that to make sure it was in fact him. Unfortunately, I have two monitors, so I can check this off to the side. Should have been, yeah, it was Upmagic vs. Free. That was Day 9 Daily number 15 that we did on November 12th. Which is actually still in my on-demand, so all of you should watch this. But Upmagic did that usual thing where he ends up, expanding here and sort of conquering this ring, but he gets 3 or 4 dropships and starts really trying to pound apart that little ledge that's overhanging the expansion, just to siege it up, take it out, do damage there. And in this game, we're going to see Upmagic not be super defensive, not be super powery. He's instead going to open up very aggressively. He's going to open up with a huge Mondo fast push to really kind of bash down the Protoss front. Let me turn up the volume a little bit here. And then he smoothly transitions into these dropships again. And I think the dropship play is interesting because the way that you discover this aggressive dropship play and working it in can happen one of two ways. One would be, and there's nothing interesting happening here, so don't worry about that. But there's two ways to discover this. The first one is that you're expanding along the outside ring and you say, Jesus, I'm having a lot of trouble dealing with shuttles, defending my double gas up here. I guess I need to get a bunch of dropships to stay alive. And then you say, but I don't just want to stay alive. I also want to take these dropships and move over and be aggressive. I'm trying to think of ways to do damage with these dropships. And that's the way to do it. The other one is to say, well, I want to get a lot of dropships here to do the damage. So, since I have all these dropships anyways, that makes expanding to the outside ring super safe. So you're seeing in one circumstance, we're beginning with the aggressive tactic and backing up to try to see how we can make sure our overarching strategy lines up with it. And in the other case, we're thinking of what our overarching strategy is, the difficulties we're dealing with, and then trying to see if we can make some tactical use of the ways we're dealing with some of our issues in our build. So it's a fun little discussion of the process of discovery. And what I love so much is we now have 2 instances of trying to do aggressive dropship action here from the same player, but in 2 completely different ways. So this sort of also feeds into my my ideology that I'm fairly strident about, that you really need to think about the mid-game first and make sure you have a set of mid-game goals that will help dictate everything you're doing in the opening. So what we're going to see now is we're going to see some early factory pushes right here, being built right there from Upmagic. And Upmagic's going to try to come in here and batter down Pure's front. And then he's going to try to transition into the dropship harass. And we're going to see how he does that very smoothly. He doesn't try to get too many factories. It ends up being a semi-aggressive push. I don't know if that's the best word for it, but he's not going to do a 5-6 factory push. He's going to do a 3 or 4 factory push, which allows him to stockpile some money so he can continue expanding. So I'm just going to crack my knuckles a little bit. Cracking my neck. Oh, hello, 1999. What's your strategy, 1999? Well, I'm going to build a pylon where his machine shop goes, and there's nothing he can do about it. And way back then, when that was actually first discovered, The genius who thought of that also realized that if you continue to run the probe around underneath the factory, you could build more pylons underneath the factory, and then it couldn't even land. Ho ho! How's that for clever? Oh, look at that little sneakeroo. That's also back when Terran players didn't realize that they could actually make Marines in this matchup, and as we can see, that the Marines adequately deal with those probes. So this is this I'm actually going to spend a little bit of time talking about. The fact that there's a Zealot here with this Dragoon. So typically, when you end up doing that early tech to the Dragoon, you'll be at about 15 of 17 food, and you'll have to make another pylon, obviously preparing so you can, keep making probes and make the Dragoon. What players discovered is that you can actually build a Zealot right when your gateway finishes, still get the you build the cybernetics core right when your gateway finishes, and you have enough time to build a Zealot while your cybernetics core is producing. So that way when the core finishes, you can also get the Dragoon. Hasn't been delayed yet. You're getting the Dragoon right on time, and you can do an aggressive push that we're seeing right here with that early Zealot. The thing you end up sacrificing is that you have to halt probe production a little bit. You have to just, be a little careful there. You don't want to go up to 16 to 17 because then you can't make the Dragoon, and you're very red-cheeked. So we end up sacrificing a little bit of stuff, a little bit of economy early on because we didn't get as many probes as we would have liked, but we're starting to see how this is really useful for us. We can actually hold off early pushes a little bit easier, and we can be aggressive more easily. We can have that Zealot dedicated to doing damage. And even if our opponent's a little bit uncareful and leaves a guy there, like an SCV repairing, you can kill that one off too with the Zealot. And look, the Zealot taking damage from the Marines instead of the Dragoon. I really like this Zealot opening. I actually started to use it a lot just because I like being aggressive early with Protoss. Probably because my mid and late game it's definitely not comparable to my Zerg. Man, my Protoss game is behind my Zerg game. But, this sort of stuff is really fun to get an advantage early because, if you're playing at the low levels, players can occasionally screw up and lose a supply depot. I mean, look at this. This is in red life. If this were just a Dragoon, you probably wouldn't be able to get it quite this low, but with the Zealot, there were a lot of guys repairing, brought it down pretty significantly low. You're pulling your opponent's workers off mining. I mean, if you didn't get to make one or two workers when you wanted to as Protoss, that's not nearly as huge hurt as to have the Terran constantly repairing with 3, sometimes 4 SCVs, and to have those not mining, and to maybe make extra Marines that he didn't want to make. All these are sorts of factors that make me really enjoy getting that early Zealot. It also makes me feel like, I'm growing hair on my chest, like I'm not actually so god-awful at Protoss. Nice little bit of fun to go on there. Sneaking over, doing a little pop-a-roo. Very common technique in Outsider. And also note that you can plan to do this because it's a 3-player map, so you will always be sharing one ring with your opponent. If Outsider were a 4-player map, I just think it would be pretty horrifically designed. But the fact that you always share part of the ring, and you're always not sharing part of the ring, that allows you to do this little pop-over sneak thing. So, of course, always consider that one any of your strategies. Can I get in there and do a little sneakeroo? And after you do this sort of aggressive opening, we're seeing Pure actually expand. And this is still a pretty decent amount of units off that early gateway. And look, the Zealots coming in here, it did die reasonably quickly. It wasn't on full health either. But this push is still getting delayed a lot more than if Pure had not made that Zealot. We see the very early gas coming down, we're getting the robotics facility, everything is as normal as can be. So notice that Pure is already gearing up to take the center. Normally I would be like, oh yeah, well, it looks like Terran's also gearing up to take his outside ring, because a lot of Terran players will early expand to here, and then take the backside. More commonly, they take the backside and then take this early center one. But, either way, I was just thinking, yeah, usual sort of thing. But then, we saw those 2 factories building up in Upmagic's base. Now, Upmagic is starting to sneak around, and Jesus, it is raining like crazy here. Holy crap, is it raining. Wowzers. So, yeah, look at this. Good supply depot placement. Now, if you're doing an aggressive mid-game, so let me actually pause this. Should probably speed it up, because this is kind of a long game. But anyways, I know you guys love hearing about StarCraft. I do too. Jesus, it's raining. Sorry, my ADD is going crazy today. Anyways, the main focus of this is how Upmagic is going to transition into that cool little dropship play, and how he's going to transition from this very aggressive opening into a seemingly normal-looking Terran versus Protoss. And I'll actually stop at that point and say, look at how normal this looks. Look at how, if someone walked into the room right now, they wouldn't quite be able to tell. that there was a huge early push going on by Upmagic. So that's the main focus, but still I want to focus on little things like this supply depot that's being built down here. Super early on as a spotter. We're going to see a lot of these little spotter things. We actually see a building being built right back there behind the mineral patch. Just helping us get a little bit more vision. And this sort of push that Upmagic's doing is going to be very strong. Notice this. Okay, so we have the engineering bay being built here. Because when it lifts, it can float over this rubble where no units can get to it. And then it can hook up here like this. Very good planning. We don't want to build it here because if we float it like this, it's right over where our enemies can be. Look at all that planning going on there. Look at that planning. Making a few more Marines. Preparing for his push. A lot of players just make Marines at the start. I like the fact that Upmagic's expanding out a little bit. He's knowing that the Marines can actually be very useful for just standard straight-up aggression with early pushes. I mean, obviously, if you're late game and you're going for a max 200 army, you know, getting 6 more Marines probably not going to be the most helpful thing in the universe. But still, getting those, just, you know, a few extra Marines to take some hits, because you're going to be against a predominantly Dragoon army, and Marines take minimum damage from Dragoons. They only take 10 damage from Dragoons. That is fairly significant. And everything's pushing out here. Everything's looking nifty. Good, nice, strong little push. Coming out predominantly with tanks. And the Vulture Flood is what's going to allow it to be aggressive. The tanks kind of get the muscle in there, allow it to begin, and allow it to maintain its strength. But the Vultures are really what are going to be taking the damage, allowing the push to progress forward, planting these mines to sort of guarantee ground. Losing 2 tanks there. A little unfortunate. Notice the siege was just a little bit late, but I still like this. You'll notice the siege happens right when we're starting to get 4 or 5 vultures. When the push began, it was just 2 vultures and 5 tanks. And if you tried to siege up there, you might not have this mine advantage to do enough. We have the barracks floating here. We also see that the engineering bay is down there as well. Nice, strong push going on here. Now, I don't have any issue as Terran of making your game plan focus on taking this expansion. I don't really have any issue with you doing an early push, setting up here, and just trying to hold this, adding on to 5 factories, continuing to be aggressive, but being very gentle, having your push do this slow sort of action, and then taking this as your intended third. Not rushing for it, but just making sure that that's part of your plan. I don't mind that. We're going to see Upmagic do something a little different. And the reason I, honestly, if you're doing this, the reason I prefer to take this over this is that this expansion is easy to defend. You just run back with your units that are right here, kill off whatever's there, and then come right back. If you're here, a drop can come around here, and then you have to run your SCVs back, and then you have to pull units all the way back around, and that's a pain. On the other hand, if you are Upmagic in this situation, it is completely reasonable to transition right into this outside ring play, as long as there are some other elements that we'll see Upmagic pull off very well. As long as he's going for a lot of dropship play, as long as he's adequately set up to defend that. So Pure's doing everything pretty normal. I do like this decision by Pure to get the Dark Templar drop. It's a little finicky, I'd say, you know, just to rely purely on the fact that Dark Templars require detection to see. A lot of players kind of obsess about that, and then they're basically flipping a coin on the whole series. You know, they're just thinking, well, if they can detect me, I'll lose, and if they don't, I'll win, and we don't like that too much. But the fact is, we already have a pretty decent economy by Pure. He does have 4 gateways up. He's making a lot of Dragoons. He has the Observers out. And getting some Dark Templar to delay this push a lot is going to be real effective. Because we dart up here, we pick off these turrets. See, look, just target firing that turret. And then we can use these Dark Templar to kind of repel it. Because in any super early push like this, Terran had to sacrifice something. A lot of times that something ends up being detection. Yeah, see, look at that. Repelling it very effectively right there. Forcing everything to retreat back to turrets. And of course, once it's here, there's not too much that Protoss can do. We plant some mines, we siege up, only 5 Dragoons. Might seem like Protoss didn't do that much, but he forced the push back to here, which is enough breathing room for Protoss to start really feeling comfortable. And note that Terran absolutely cannot advance forward without detection. So this is a pretty significant damper on the Terran push. There are the Marines doing their thing. And we're going to see that engineering bays actually should be floating somewhere around there. But yeah, adding on more gateways is pure. So notice something about the ordering that pure is doing. If there were no aggression, pure would probably have 4 gateways, 4 gateways on 2 bases. Then he'd be taking his third, and then he'd be adding on to 6 or 7 gateways. That drop didn't go as planned, but still, delaying the push. However, since pure is dealing with this push, he can't take that early third, because he has to kind of build more gateways. So what you do is you just rearrange the order of what you're doing. If you were going to go 4 gateways on 2 bases, and then have 7 gateways on 3 bases, you build up to 6 or 7 gateways on 2 bases, and then you take your third base. You just swap the order of them. So really, you should not think of this. You should not be in Pure's situation thinking, man, I really got to ad-lib the hell out of this. You should instead just think about what are the components of my build and how do I rearrange them around. And that, I think, is how Pure is able to so effectively deal with this harassment. Because we did see that there was a fairly quick Dark Templar tech. So that could have been a number of things. It could have been an Arbiter tech. I think more reasonably, though, because I've seen Pure's playstyle, he was probably just going for a delayed 4 Dark Templar with 1 shuttle harass. So, probably his plan was just to stick to 4 gateways, get a shuttle, get 4 Dark Templar, harass with it, expand, and then build more gateways. That seems most reasonable to me. And we have this nice little push going along. We don't really want Terran to get too big in terms of their army size. We do need to make sure we don't end up letting him establish himself too much. This is a nice little job that was done by Upmagic. Now, up in this top corner, you see a little orange blip there. At least I hope you do if Procaster can get that. For any of you who can't see that or can't make that out, that's actually a dropship thinger, a starport dropship thinger. Yes, everyone, please speak like me. That's a dropship producing center, aka a starport being built there. And we're going to see Upmagic just sort of smoothly transition right into what he was going to do anyway. I dislike that he lost that engineering bay, but, you know, can't win them all. We're going to see this nice little harassment. He's going to continue to just sort of poke around here. And only 4 factories. That's not an extremely dedicated push, right? We're seeing some more turrets being added. We're seeing the refinery being added. And we're going to see Upmagic pull back and go right into this dropship play that we saw him do against Free. He already has SCVs positioned at the top and the bottom. He's probably going to be stockpiling quite a few minerals at this stage in the game, because he does only have 4 factories. He just lost a lot of units, so he's not going to be needing to build supply depots. So he's going to use all that extra money to build some turrets for defense, to tech towards those dropships, and to expand a bunch. And now it's starting to look like Pure's getting his order back, right? We see him getting the Arbiters right now. Again, I think he would have taken... actually, let's discuss that ordering right now. What we have seen right here looks like a rearrangement of the following. So pretend if we're Pure and we didn't get attacked, right? What Pure almost certainly would have done is he would have gone early expand, tech up to 4 gateways, shuttle, and do a Dark Templar harass. Then he would have taken his third, tech to Arbiters, and then added on some more gateways. What it looks like we saw is just a rearrangement. Nothing too fancy going on here. He still went to that same stage where he got 4 gateways, got the Dark Templar, and then he added on a few more gateways, held off this push, took his third, and then got the Arbiter. Cool, now we're starting to see this pattern here. We're learning what he would have done in another circumstance without actually having to see it. And that, I think, is pretty important. Actually, the probably most important thing I would see from Pure's play is the fact that he is going for Arbiters after he's taken his third. I think that is probably the most significant aspect of all that. And this is good by Pure. Just checking up on things. He sees the starport, making the drop ships. And the Zealot's like, get me out of here. He's like freaking out. He's like, I didn't sign up for this. Poor guy. And yeah, look. The Protoss is focusing on the center control, right? He's going to be gearing towards taking this expansion. He now has control of the other main because he has the center. Very good strategy. Adding on an Arbiter Tribunal. One thing I absolutely despise about Pure's play this game is his building placement. Ugh, gross. Ugh. Again, notice this transition right into the late game, getting the Armory as we're expanding here to the bottom, still on 4 factories, getting the Starport with the dropships, making lots of dropships. Anyways, back to Pure. I hate his gateway placement this game. I mean, you really should spend the extra second every time you're starting to build gateways to say, is this god-awful placement or not? So notice we have this Vulture drop right here that's going to do, limited damage. The thought was good. It's the thought that counts. That's why we plant these little spotter pylons here and here, and this is part of the reason why we see the Terran player built a supply depot there at the bottom so early. That supply depot feels really meaningful to me, because I bet there were games that Upmagic played where he was doing this push, he was actually probably going to win with the push, doing so much damage, feeling really good, feeling confident, and it turns out the Protoss just ferried a whole bunch of units up here and waltzed into his main. So we can actually glean quite a bit of information from this. And I think that's very creative problem solving by Upmagic, to say, well, what am I going to do anyways, and how can I do that exact same thing to help solve this problem I'm having? So he's saying, well, I'm building supply depots anyways, so I may as well build a supply depot to be a spotter here. And I'm sure for many of you that's intuitive, but on these maps that are coming out nowadays that are getting increasingly weirder and weirder and weirder, doing really clever things with your buildings, I think I really like. There was one game where a Protoss player was going for a shuttle harass with Reaver, so he built his robotics facility and his support bay to get the Reaver in a really weird location, walling off an expansion he was going to take much, much later in the game, which I think is absolutely brilliant. He delayed it for an incredibly, incredibly, incredibly long time. He delayed, that aggression by walling it off with the Robo and the support bay for a really long time. I think that's another example of great, great problem solving. I actually think that was Zhangbi versus Haya, or Zhangbi versus Really. Pretty sure it was Zhangbi in the game. But anyways, we see those dropships. We're starting to add on more Goliaths. We only recently saw Upmagic add on a barracks, because only then is he really starting to think about getting more factories. Upmagic's already taking this top place. He's doing a lot of expanding, very smooth transitioning. Pure maintaining his control of the center, abusing the fact that he has that control by going for the main up at the Northland. And now at this stage in the game, when we were watching Upmagic versus Free, Free did in fact, okay, this is bad, don't do this, but Free got a whole bunch of speed shuttles. I like that option a lot to deal with this sort of stuff, because then you can do counter drops here at this top and bottom expo. And in a sense you end up delaying your arbiters, which is okay, because your opponent has spent all this money on these small attacks with dropships, which are pretty expensive. So that, I think, was really good, the fact that we got all these free guys, but I really don't like having the units here. I like having them up a little bit more. Because, as we're going to see, it's very vulnerable to storm. Look at those storms decimating it. And of course, we're starting to see also why Pure's opening was so good. I have seen Pure do this Dark Templar drop harass before, and I like it. I like, early expanding and then going for the 4 DT with shuttle harass. But what's so nice is that not only does it allow for easy Arbiter tech, but easy Templar tech. We're not seeing tons more gateways being added on by Pure. We're instead seeing a lot of focus on getting gas and getting that storm drop. Because on this map, those drops can be such a pain in the ass. And being able to have Storm there ready to storm a bunch of clustered units that really can't even maneuver around easily is instrumental. That's going to be pivotal in defending that little high ground pod right next to your expo. I'm going to see some more dropping action. DTs are actually pretty effective just to have in dropships later in the game if there's a vulnerable expansion, because they do quite a lot of damage. And storm drops, as you'll clearly see right now, are good. They can do a lot of damage. One thing I really like, just a little thing, Pure cut in from above instead of from below, because from above, the SCVs can only run up. You have a lot more opportunities to do serious damage. As long as you drop in the path of the retreating SCVs, or should I say where they would retreat. So not speed shuttles, not a huge devotion to shuttles in the mid-game. Instead, sticking to limited numbers of shuttles and Storm to defend the drops, as opposed to lots of speed shuttles the way that Free dealt with Upmagic. And the dropships, of course, are going to be used to control this outer ring a little bit more, used to do a little bit of additional damage. But this is where I think Upmagic's starting to get a little falling apart a little bit. He just doesn't quite have enough stuff there ready to defend everything. I think Upmagic was intending on doing more damage with that drop. But still, I like the way that he did this opening. He was so aggressive that it kind of forced his opponent to be tucked away into these bases, which means that dropping here is even more damaging. Because, I mean, really, if you let your opponent do what he wants, he's probably going to expand here and here, and then take this one, then waltz up to this main, and then maybe take this back expansion and this natural. But if you can force him to take this mineral expansion in addition to his normal natural, when you drop here, you not only have killed this off, but you have an easy way to walk right up here and take this out, and then to scoop directly into the main. Cool, cool planning. I just wish Upmagic had defended his ring expansions a little bit more. And, you know, not suicided dropships. That's one thing that I think is characteristic of Upmagic's play. If you watch it a lot, he's a brilliant player, really creative, but a lot of times he's just not watching the right place. And that can be very depressing. So see the tank taking some damage from some Dragoons, and this sort of push, I think, is underrated. If you can actually get dropships back here, you can do a ton of damage. That's why I like this choice of Upmagic to actually, let me rephrase that. I like the fact that Upmagic is doing this because of what we've seen Pure do. Free just had a standard sort of Zealot Dragoon ground army with a lot of speed shuttles. But if you don't have any speed shuttles and you're relying on Storm, the way that Pure is, these little drops at the back are way more damaging because you actually have room to maneuver to get around the Storm. And if you have 2 tanks and a handful of vultures, you're pretty much going to stop anything that gets dropped out of 1 or 2 shuttles. So we're positioning, we're getting ready for the drop. We're starting to increasingly see how useful those drop ships are. Upmagic continuing to expand around a bunch. And right now this game's pretty close. I mean, it probably in Pure's advantage by a little bit. Obviously, because this recall is about to happen, and I knew about it. But also because that storm drop way at the bottom. I mean, Pure killed off like 50 SCVs. Just this absurd, well, probably more realistically, like 15. Which is still a ton of SCVs. That's so many SCVs. And obviously, these recalls are a pain in the ass. What you're doing as Upmagic, as your goal, is you're trying to put so much pressure on your opponent with drops, with this early gameplay and with the drops, that he doesn't quite have enough money to do these recalls. If the Protoss does decide to go ahead and do a recall, he doesn't have enough units in the middle. Unfortunately, this dropship harass by Upmagic wasn't quite as effective as it could have been, and I think those Dark Templars early on for Pure were instrumental for holding this thing off. And we're starting to see now this sort of trade-off that the players do. Notice that we're starting to see Upmagic sort of just sack this top and bottom expo and instead sort of bleed out into the middle. Unfortunately, Pure is in pretty good control right here. But, you know, I just think this is such a fun game. There's been aggression pretty much the entire time. And this is one of the reasons why we like vultures. And also, to be honest, this is why I prefer expanding to the top as my first expansion than the bottom, because really this is such a far walk distance from your main, and this is a lot closer. Running around with Arbiters, and at this stage in the game I think it's going to be pretty tough for Upmagic. He just passed his phase of dropship prominence. This is the point where no matter what big dropship antics you do as Upmagic, it's going to get denied pretty harshly by these Arbiters. But still, I think that there's a significant window in there where if you try to make a lot of use of your dropships, you can do a ton of damage. And this is actually one of the easiest ways to lose, is to not have enough stuff positioned up there. Because, I mean, we even saw Pure, even though Pure got those beautiful storms off to kill that drop on the ledge, Upmagic still was able to kill off like 8 Dragoons or so. Pretty significant amount of damage that went on there. And of course, afterwards, I'm going to do a brief review of Upmagic's build again, because there's a few other things I'm only now noticing on my, I guess, 1.5 rewatch. I watched this game while I was trying to do coding for another project, so I only sort of half knew what was going on. And then, of course, I sort of glanced at it again when I was on the phone with my mom, as I said beforehand, and I watched this and I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. And then we see the recalls coming in here now. Oh, man, the double recall. And now, notice right here how normal this looks. Let's actually, I'm going to rewind here because I said I wanted to do this. With the exception of this top expansion being gone, this looks like a pretty normal Terran versus Protoss. I mean, if I didn't tell you how far into the game this was, like if this wasn't here, it would be pretty hard to determine what the openings of each player was. I mean, we go into this space, we see kind of a lot of turtling going on, we see the upgrades from Terran, and, you know, usual recalling action by Protoss. And again, one of the biggest benefits of recalling is... Ooh, those are good storms. Ooh, Jesus. One of the biggest benefits of recalling is less that you're doing a lot of damage to your opponent, and more that you're drawing all his stuff away from where he wants to be, back into his main. And a storm drop again. This is very good. Somehow only killing 3 SCVs. Not quite sure how that happened. Poor Upmagic biting his lower lip. And you know, sometimes I wish that Upmagic would just play extremely, extremely standardly, because I still remember watching a game between Upmagic and Poussin on Longinus, and this is when Poussin was an unbelievably strong player. I mean, he's able to, you know, do some fun stuff now, but I mean, this is back when he was just an absolutely incredible top-tier Protoss. And Upmagic just played standard as can be and walked right over him. So I'm kind of interested to see Upmagic do a little bit more of that stuff right now. But here comes the dramatic finish. So, as a Terran player, you need on this map to be comfortable with this finish. You're moving out with your Doom army. I wish they would select the Terrans so we can see exactly what the Terrans' upgrades are. It looks like we have actually the shield upgrade. Oh, that's pretty fancy. Coming out from the little Pitos Pure. But let's select a Terran unit. I desperately want to select a Terran unit. Come on, observers, select the Terran units. And... yeah, there we go. We'll notice that those are 2-1 tanks. This is the Doom push, as usual. The very big maxed army. Do a lot of damage because I've been powering all game long. Style push. And notice how the Protoss now is recoiling away from the middle. The Terran is just conquering the middle. And the Protoss is wandering around and sort of cleaning up these side expansions. This Expo down here at the bottom ideally doesn't get hit this much. And, you know, we don't want those Dark Templars to do a lot of damage. DTs are so huge in these big pushes. If you can just get, like, a DT to be hitting from a weird angle. Look, it's 2 tanks down. So brutal. And this is the way that these endgames need to work. I actually think that this is more convenient for Protoss. It feels easier for Protoss, because even though there's this huge army in the middle that you can't quite hit, you just pull back and safely expand to these outside ring expansions and just sort of wear the Terran down. The Terran is the one who has to let this sort of stuff happen. Terran is the one who has to let his ring expansions die, is the one who has to deal with all these recalls. And it's really important that you can split your units up appropriately here. I do think it's important for Terran to just have one extra dropship doing some sort of drop down here. I think the difference between having 0 and 1 dropship in the late game is huge on this map. It's such a big deal to be able to have this. You know, you're losing a bunch of stuff in your main. There's been a recall. That's pretty standard on this map. You know, Terran's wandering up here, killing off these Expos. If Terran just has 1 dropship and just comes right back here and denies another Expo from mining, which would be the bottom one, then, you know, you're just in fantastic shape as Terran after this big trade. Ideally, this trade is, it does a little bit less damage. I mean, you don't want to lose every single factory you have in your main command center and that sort of thing. It's certainly a little bit less severe, as we're seeing right now. But this is typically where Terran now has control of the center. This is where he's going to be expanding to this top expansion. A lot of times we see Terran taking this top main. There's nice little mining action going down. I'm just going to briefly skip ahead. We're seeing some other stuff going on. It's just cleanup. Terran's trying to continue to push forward, but Protoss, look at this, taking the ring expansions, taking this top, really far away ring, cleaning everything up from the Terran, and not yet confronting his big army until just now. First time we've ever really seen Protoss confront this huge push. And notice this line of tanks down here hugging the wall. Absolutely incredible. Look at the funneling that's going on. All the units just clumping right up there. Pure, unfortunately, has good macro, so, you know, it's going to be a little bit tough for our Terran friend. We have one SCV who's holding the line. Confusing the Zealots. Never give up, never surrender, little SCV. You got this, man. Continuing to storm. Excellent job by Pure. Notice how there were no SCVs mining there when we just checked. That's because Pure, in the midst of just losing all these expansions, notice how there is an orange blip. You see something right here, and you'll notice It might be a little hard to see on your screen, but at this right expansion right here, we don't actually see any probes mining on the mini-map. There's not enough purple there for probes to be mining. So really, Protoss was pretty much cut down to this bottom expansion right here. So imagine for a moment if Terran had been able to mine from this bottom, if Terran had that dropship with vultures there, killing all this stuff off, controlling that bottom place, Protoss right now would not be mining. Protoss is really in an unbelievably close position. Unfortunately, Protoss has tons more units, and so we'll probably be able to repel it without too much difficulty. But look at how close this is. This is a pretty impressively close game. Yeah, look at that. No probes mining. Unless we're talking about gas, which doesn't count as mining. And one tank just valiantly sitting there looking northwards towards the rising sun. Because you know the sun rises in the north, sets in the west, or something like that. I don't know. I don't do science anymore. But yeah, we're seeing this nice little push happen, and this I actually like quite a bit, this usual sort of standard push. I mean, Upmagic's going to have to eventually leave, because I actually think he's going to like run out of buildings soon. He's going to get eliminated. But this is so close. Man, and what I think is another great lesson to take from this is how excellent the crisis management was from both players. So, I mean, let's just, to sum up, Terran's finally now dead. But Protoss is really only mining from this bottom expansion and can't really do anything from this top. So, I mean, we're going to see GG in just a moment here, but very close game overall. Kind of like an impressively close game. So, let's actually review Upmagic's build. So, he's going to do this early aggression, and part of the reason that helps him do the early aggression is the map, the way it's structured. Like I said, pretty close starting positions. You can do a lot of abuse there. And actually, if we go back and look at the main screen, if Terran was here and Protoss was here, notice Terran can do the same thing, where Terran can push kind of like to here, to this wall, and then kind of hope to work around like that. It's obviously easier to go from here and work around like that. But still really, really easy early game push to do. So that's the first thing that helps him do that. And then he transitions right into getting a bunch of dropships, not just to defend his outside expansions, not just defend his ring expansions, but to put pressure on these cliffs and to, you know, do a whole bunch of stuff around the ring side of the map. I think it's unfortunate that Upmagic flew so many dropships into other things, because I really think that Upmagic could have controlled his southern end of the ring a little bit better, kept those SCVs alive a little longer, and subsequently maybe even pulled this game through. Probably one of the two big moments I see in Pure's situation that helped him stay alive was, one, the way in which he used Dark Templar to really deny this push from doing any serious economic damage. What was the other one? I definitely had two. Oh yeah, that huge storm drop at the south. Man, that was big. The storm drop to kill off all those workers, and the storm drop to shut down all these guys that were hanging out on this high ground ledge. But either way, I think that still there's a nice theme of dealing with crises, dealing with this weird sort of trade-off that happens very, very frequently. Another wonderful, wonderful example of this sort of trade-off being really close is Light against Bisu, one of the first games ever to be played on Outsider. Both players really, really, really like understood the shit out of this map to know that, you know, Protoss is going to be taking the middle, Terran's going to be taking the back, Terran's going to push out, and Protoss is going to take the outside. Wonderful, wonderful little game. So let's go ahead and remute the chat and just take a handful of questions because, oh my god, I need to apologize for something. The last two casts, 51 and 50, two, which would be Kala vs. Hoja and July vs. Firebat Hero, are corrupt. They're gone. They will never be anywhere. I updated to the newest version of Procaster and forgot to set everything to auto-record. So those are just gone. That's completely my fault. So for those of you who tuned in, tell everyone how awesome it was. And it will be the long-lost memory of Sean's wonderful analysis of Hoja's tactical genius. Which, of course, you know, if you meet me in real life, just ask me about it, and I'm happy to talk about StarCraft. But anyways, let us continue with this. So Colossus says, what's a good rule for deciding when to just attack, move your entire army in, and then focus on macro or microing your army in a battle to maximize its effectiveness? What's a good way to practice this? It's really what Colossus is describing. And this game's actually a great example of this. You'll almost always hear me talk about how important macro is. And a lot of players feel the importance of macro. That they'll get in a big fight, they'll barely come out ahead and go, ha, wow, I defeated my opponent. And their opponent will come out with an army just as big as the first one 5 seconds later, and then you lose. And it's kind of like, that wasn't fun. So, a lot of players know that macro's good, but sometimes it feels like you attack, move your army, go back and macro, and then you come back and all your stuff's dead. And what is a good way to practice this? When do you really need to know when to bounce away? So I think that's such a tough question. That actually takes a lot of practice. I think the way that I would practice it is, let's say I'm a Protoss player, and we saw Pure do this beautiful micro here to hold everything off. He was focusing on macro for 1 second, and there he may have screwed it up. What I would do is, just in all your practice games from now on, when you're in a battle, say, I'm going to macro right now, and go back and macro and come back, and especially rewatch the replay and remember this moment when you declare that you are going to macro, and see if something could have been controlled a little bit better. And a lot of times, some of these big unit controls can be fixed by pre-battle positioning. Like having all your stuff spread out. A lot of times people have their Dragoons and Zealots too close. So when they attack, move everything, the Zealots actually just take all the brunt of damage from the mines instead of having the Dragoons clear some mines out. A lot of times people have the Zealots too far away, and the Dragoons will run up, clear out some mines. All the Dragoons will die to the tanks, and then some Zealots swarm in. And it's just kind of, yeah. Though, think about those sorts of things, but then start declaring again when you're going to be macroing and adjust. Just do lots of adjustment, and always remember the number one rule is to declare what you're doing so you have some place to adjust. Don't just play and magically try to come up with what the correct way to play is. It's always much faster and easier to begin with that adjustment point. So I hope that was an adequate answer. It's tough. It's kind of a tough thing to do. I would say skew on the side of macro, because it's always easy to look back and say, oh, I could have microed better. So Zerg Needs Food says, what should be Terran's response to recalls in their base? On another note, why does it seem like Upmagic's army wasn't the usual death ball that is seen? So let's take the first question. What is Terran's response to recalls in their base? A lot of times it will be to clear out the recall and just to not really stress too much about it, to position yourself effectively, to pull out the appropriate units, to make sure you're still upgrading, to make sure you're still macroing, just to not let it mentally affect you that much. Because a lot of times, kind of similar to how when Protoss loses a shuttle with a Reaver, that's always a really good time to push. Same way, after you've killed off a recall, pretty damn good time to push, really. So a lot of times, you'll end up fending off recalls. If a recall kind of does okay, you can just sort of continue with expanding and kind of pretend that it didn't happen, because a lot of times it's going to be a fairly even trade-off. On Outsider in particular, though, in the late games, you kind of need to just take it with the recalls. If these recall and expansion, you just need to lift, minimize SCV losses, pull out, and keep pushing through the center, because it has that weird who has center versus who has ring dynamic going on. But I think is the one big adjustment you really have to make. The second thing, which is, why did it seem like Upmagic's army wasn't the usual death ball that is seen? That's because he devoted a lot of resources to doing harassment along the edges that didn't quite seem to work as well. So it was a little bit smaller than a usual death ball, but it's always going to be a little bit smaller. But the idea is that with the harassment that you've done with the dropships, your Protoss will be in even worse position. So if you look at the typical games, you have this giant Protoss army versus the giant Terran death ball, and you get something that looks kind of like this game. Here in this game, we saw a bunch of harassment, a bunch of cute stuff, so a smaller Protoss army versus a kind of smaller death ball, but still the same things going on. Don't get too hung up on the size of it, because there's all these relative factors that come in. It's more of like the idea of it. So let's go ahead and just take one more question, because I actually have a sore throat because it was raining yesterday, and I had to walk 35 minutes in the rain without an umbrella to class, so I'm coming down with illness. But of course, Day 9 Daily is never late. Oh, I like this question by heart. What do you think about lockdown versus arbiters on one of these arbiter-friendly maps? What do I think about ghosts? Because the thing is, this is what's going through my head right now. It's not, is lockdown good or is lockdown bad? We can obviously think of ways where the Arbiter is coming in, everyone can picture it, and you lock down the Arbiter and you go, I'm so fucking awesome, and then you can maybe kill it off the Goliath. Yeah, rock on. It's everything else. It's the idea of the Ghost getting the Academy we're going to have. We are probably going to be getting, the science facility with the add-on. This is the issue I think I have with it on this map. You have two gases, Terran, really. You have your main and your natural, and you have these two side expansions. So you have two geysers. You're going to have plenty of money to make, you know, maybe another command center, so you can take out, oh, wait, no, maybe I do take it back. Because what I was going to say is you really have two gas that you're spending on double upgrades, a bunch of factories, and if you're getting the science facility anyways, for these upgrades, you can get a science vessel, which helps your Doom push. You can have EMP with it. That was very similar to the Light vs. Bisu game I just mentioned. Therefore, if you got ghosts, you'd have to spend all the gas on the ghosts. You'd be spend the gas on the lockdown, and the ghosts really would only be useful along those outside edges because you'd kind of have to have the ghosts positioned there anyways. Whereas with the vessels, you can EMP there and then float right back to your main army. So I prefer science vessels there. On a map where you can get in a little bit better position, maybe get a third gas a little more easily, maybe pick off the arbiters a little bit more easily, I think Ghost would be pretty sweet. I would think of a way to also have nukes incorporated in, because then that would sort of continue to amplify the effectiveness of those Ghosts. So we've been going for 50 minutes now. Once again, I apologize that 5152 will never be up ever, but that is going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 53. And, wow, yeah, NBC Star League Finals are going on tomorrow night. It's going to be Jaedong versus Flash. Hopefully NBC doesn't screw it up too much, even though they've already butchered it violently. But all of you should also show up down in San Diego to Joe's Pizza. It's going to be at 10 p.m. There's a thread about it on TeamLiquid.net. Just plug in for that event. I went last time for Jaedong vs. Fantasy. Wonderful little event down there. So you should all show up. Pizza's fantastic, and StarCraft is fantastic too. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in, and cheers!